Hi, I'm Amanda Mikulev, and thank you for joining us today on the Fitness Mindset Podcast. Each episode, I'll bring on guests that will discuss topics encompassing all things fitness, nutrition, mindset related, and even at times relationship stuff too. This show is sponsored by Kyani and the Triangle of Health, the only whole food supplementation system I take, which fuels my day to achieve both fitness and task-orientated goals. Make sure you subscribe now to be the first to know when a new episode has been released. Enjoy this week's episode.
Ladies, welcome back to episode 41 of the Fitness Mindset Podcast. I'm joined back again with Elena Domazet. So previously, you came on episode 35 and we had a discussion around antidepressants. So I wanted to bring you back on today because I was flicking through your website the other week because you recently launched a new website. And I noticed that you do couples guidance, and I find it such an interesting counselling service in general. And I wanted to basically get your expertise on how you go about coaching couples, what some of the common issues and barriers are, and any tools, techniques, and activities that you offer out there as a particular service. So just before we get stuck into it though, just let everyone know your background, what you qualified in, and then you can talk us through that.
Yeah, sure. I'm so happy to be back and excited to be doing a podcast with you again. I enjoy doing this because I just feel it just gives it a nice bit of awareness around, the services that I offer, and not a lot of people are aware of these kind of services. So that essentially is a segue into what I do. So I'm a qualified hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and life coach. And I essentially specialize in people who suffer from anxiety and depression to overcome that and gain confidence and better coping mechanisms to deal with day-to-day tasks. As well as enhancing, the potential that's within them. So becoming their true authentic selves as well. So there are many different services that I do offer, as you mentioned, couples guidance being one of them. And couples guidance is a really interesting one because it's the way it started off was I was seeing individuals seeking guidance in how to navigate their relationships and how, whether they were in relationships that were toxic or whether they're just trying to better themselves so they can, be better for their partner. And, the conversation started happening about whether I, do couples guidance. And this has been a while back now. And, I thought to myself, well, there's no reason why, I shouldn't offer that service if both couples want to, enhance themselves and therefore enhance their relationship.
Yeah.
So that's how that started in terms of that service. And the way essentially I run it is I meet with the couples first. So I really get an understanding of, who they are, what they each want. And, each one has a chance to obviously speak if there's any concerns about, whether the other one is not doing something or is doing something that's frustrating them or whatever the case may be. And then I actually have individual sessions to process anything that they need to process for themselves. And then we eventually come together and then we work out where they're at and whether they need to continue doing the individual sessions or whether they can just go off and implement the activities that were set. And they just contacted me if they want another session or a tune-up, or if they just want to individually come to me. So a lot of the time what I've realized is, we often project our issues on our significant others. And that's a huge, it can be a huge problem in a lot of relationships, that there's the blame game, there's the projection, there's bringing past, trauma into the current relationship and, acting out as if, this person that you're with is going to do the same thing as previous partner or, whatever the case may be. And although you're still with that person because, you love them and they're a good person, your behavior is not showing that in that way. So it's really important that when I'm seeing clients who are seeking couples guidance, that they're doing the inner work first. So it's not necessarily about their other spouse. unless it's a toxic relationship and that spouse is, say, a narcissist or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
It's more specific about doing the inner work so they are then able to present as their best selves with their partner.
Sure. Okay. So how long have you actually been offering that as a service?
I've been offering that as a service for about 6 months now.
Yeah. And how's it working?
Yeah.
Like, what sort of success rate do you see with some of the couples?
So it's honestly, it's a bit 50-50 in a sense where you notice that couples end up splitting because they realize they're not really meant to be in that relationship and they were filling each other's voids.
Yep.
And there are other couples where they have their huge epiphanies and their huge self-realizations that what are we doing to ourselves and each other? Like, we love each other, so let's become the best version of ourselves. So it's really, it's a 50-50 scenario where when you're coming to seek this service, you almost must be ready and prepared to reveal what's going to come out of it.
Yeah.
So, and that can be quite confronting and scary as well.
So what are some of the common issues you get faced with these couples then? Like, how many couples on average do you think you might see a month?
So I would say up to, say, two couples a month.
Yep.
And because it's essentially it's four people, because it's individual as well. But in terms of like the presenting issues, a lot of the time it's communication breakdown. And when I say communication breakdown, what I mean is they're communicating, but they're not comprehending. So it's more the comprehension of what each, person is saying. So you can communicate all you want, but it's about whether there's going to be a level of comprehension happening. So that's where I feel the actual breakdown is, not the communication itself, but the comprehension of what the person is expressing. So it's amazing that when there's a person mediating that experience, they interpret what their spouse is saying in a very different way, because they're understanding that they're not out to get them. It's not a defense mechanism. It's genuinely hearing the desires and the needs of your spouse. And it also comes down to loving your spouse based on their love language. And that's a second issue that I find, that they're not well aware enough in how to love their spouse based on their love language. Now, there's an incredible book I read many years ago called The 5 Love Languages, and I incorporate that book within my sessions as well. And I do tell my clients who are coming to see me for couples guidance to read that book so they can figure out what their love language is, because a lot of the time they don't even know themselves.
Yeah.
Until we start digging deep, and then they realize, my love language is physical touch, and he doesn't touch me often enough, and that's why I don't feel loved. But he may love her, but it's just that he's not loving her in her love language, if that makes sense.
For sure. Yeah, so I read that book probably about 2-3 years ago. It's a really good book. It's pretty old too. And I guess this can be related to how parents show their love to kids as well. It's the same.
I was just going to say that as well. It's actually no different to how to love your child based on their love language. And another question that comes up for me often is, I do get clients who are, say, in their teens that I'm seeing individually. I do get their parents contacting me, seeking guidance in how to better support their child. And again, I tell them, learn what their love language is. That is the best way to support your child, is learn the love language, because you can't love, like if you've got 2 or 3 children and they're all different, you can't love them the same way. And I think that's what parents are realizing now, is that you can't, back in the day that there was none of this love language business. It's just you show respect and you show honesty and truth, and that's all it is. That's the values set for every single family member in the house. But it's not about that anymore, and it never really was, but now it's being brought more to light.
Yeah, great point. So going back to what you said initially about the whole communication thing, so a friend of mine once said to me, and this saying could not be more true, that a lot of people listen to respond rather than understand. And that's what you're saying about the communication breakdown, is everyone's waiting for their turn to talk, but no one's sitting there shutting up for a moment and going, maybe my approach isn't so good after all, and it's very hard to admit that we're in the wrong, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
I know that, like, if I've had someone be a sounding board for me, it's the instant thing is to get your back up, because we want to think we're right and perfect and all powerful and amazing. But the truth is that we're not, and that we need that someone to pull us up and go, because we don't listen to our partners because we take them for granted. So that's where that third party coming in and going, no, this is why this is actually happening. And it's like, oh, quite deflating, but confronting, and it's necessary for a relationship. So this is why I wanted to talk about this today.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
it's about taking responsibility in relationships in a big way. Going to the parents thing now, what you said was also brilliant about how you cannot love your kids in the same way. So it's kind of ironic in a way, because it's like parents will often say, oh, but I love you all equally, but you can't parent them all equally. So let's unpack that for a minute, and let's go a little bit deeper into that.
Sure. So it's interesting, because I had a session today with the parents of a client wanting to seek support in how to better, support their child as they're going through one of my programs. And what came up was, but I gave my child everything and everything she needed and whatever she wanted. I said, well, that's part of the problem, because if you're enabling everything without really setting boundaries and a limit to teach them a way where, it's okay to want things, but want them in a way without the demand and with more respect, if that makes sense. So she had one child that was like that, but the other child that was more chilled and didn't have that level of demand or expectation to receive everything. So more attention was brought onto the child that demanded. So you can automatically see that although the other child wasn't as demanding, most likely her love language wasn't met either, because of the fact that there was a focus on meeting just one child's demands. So, and it doesn't mean that the parents love the child any less, like you said, that I love you all equally, but loving equally and then also providing what the child needs are two different things as well, because the providing is the loving, but it's knowing how to provide what that child needs based on their love language. So, I mean, so I've got friends with, I've got many friends with kids who often, and again, I'm not someone who has children, but I'm finding I'm getting calls so much about how to deal with their child's behavior. And what I'm noticing is it's not the child that's acting out, it's you. So you've got to check yourself in where you're not aware within your parenting disciplines to then be able to manage and support your child the way they need.
Let's look at birth order. So you've got firstborn, secondborn, middle child syndrome, and then the spoiled lastborn.
Yeah.
How can parents parent the birth order a little bit better, more effectively? Because, like, I'm a middle child, for example, and I had all that middle child syndrome, right?
Ditto.
So it didn't matter. Like, I tried to be the high achiever to get my parents' attention. I tried everything in my power to get the same love and attention that my brother and sister got, but I was also the most independent one too, to a degree. I mean, my sister was very independent as well, but I just felt like it didn't even matter if I did what she did. I still didn't get the same amount of help, if you will. Where can parents go a little bit better for the next generation?
You know what? The answer is always simple. And I want to laugh at this because it's really like it all comes down to doing the work to become a conscious person, to therefore become a conscious parent. You've got to understand yourself first to then be able to understand anyone else on any form of level. So if you are asking, how can I support my child better? How can I treat my child, a certain way? That problem lies with you not them. It's not the child that's the issue. For you to understand how to support them because they're going through this crisis. It's the issue is the parent themselves, that they actually need to do the inner work in order for them to be able to maintain their space, to then hold the space for their children or child to support them. Now, I've often had conversations with my mum about this, and and I'll say, oh, I had to do this because I didn't have that support, and blah blah blah. And often it'll be like, oh, but we didn't know any better. And that's absolutely right. They did not know any better, and that's what it comes down to. And and I often hear, oh, if I knew now what I knew then, I would have done things differently. And of course, that's hindsight. That's the case with many things. But the thing is, when I'm going through my program with my clients who are dealing with traumas from their childhood because of lack of support for whatever reason, I say to my clients, it is not your fault that this happened. It's because you didn't have the support you needed, but it's also not your parents' fault because they didn't know any better. So what it is, it's about calling it for what it is, and then just taking responsibility, which is what you said before, relative to even in relationships. It all comes back to taking responsibility for you, for your life, and for your actions and for your behaviors. That's what it comes down to. No matter what relationship you're in, no matter what kind of family dynamic you're in, it all goes back to yourself, becoming a conscious person, and taking responsibility for your life.
Oh, if only every European father and mother heard that bit of advice. Get some personal development under your belt and then go and be a parent. That's what it sounds like.
Oh yeah, but that's what it is. And I've got friends again who have kids, and they're like, shit, like I wish I had this 10 years ago, but they've got it now, so it's never too late. Your kids are still young, don't worry, you haven't screwed them up that much yet.
Yeah, totally. All right, cool. Maybe give us a scenario with one of your relationship clients recently. So them breaking up's not a bad thing either. That's a good thing, because at least they come to a resolution. So whether they fix things or move on, they've realised that staying together or apart, good idea. So I don't know, use maybe 2 case studies where they've stayed together and where they've broken up. Obviously don't know names, but
of course,
nuts and bolts of each situation, and what sort of techniques you used for each one.
Sure. So for one couple, there was extreme lack of boundaries on one person's part, meaning that the spouse was pushing the limits in terms of respect, in terms of values of the other spouse, and what came through was the lack of boundaries that needed to be implemented from one of the spouses. Now, when the spouse realized this, they said, well, I want to be prioritized, and I want this, and I want that, and I want boundaries in place. And I made a point of, well, that's fantastic. Everyone wants that. But how are you doing that for yourself first? And that was the question. And it was kind of like, oh, well, I'm actually not. Well, exactly. Have you prioritized yourself? No. Have you set your own boundaries within yourself relative to your friends, relative to your work? Are you constantly feeling burnt out? And if you are, why? So that's naturally going to play out in all areas of your life. If you're not putting yourself first, you're teaching others how to put yourself second. You're telling them, well, I'm not putting myself first, so that's okay for you to put me second as well. And I'll just continue, getting depleted and on burnout because, I'm not honoring myself. So the first thing was, yes, although he wasn't honoring her in a way that her value is, it's because she wasn't honoring that way. So she didn't lead by example to allow him the space to do that. Now, if you allow someone to get away with stuff, they will. He was never going to call her out and say, oh, you're not honoring your respect and your values. So, you should. No, that's not what's going to happen.
People don't have a clue about that sort of stuff, unfortunately.
Exactly, because therefore it becomes quite an unconscious and vicious cycle in the relationship, that, unless it gets brought to the surface and in the way that it does, as I've just explained, people don't know any better. So what's, with that relationship, what's happened now is they're just on a bit of a break to discover what it is they truly want and regroup, essentially develop their values, develop what it is, they truly want. And then they're going to come together and decide whether it matches, because that's another thing. It's, do you, the relationship that you're in, are you matching with their values? Do your values match? Do your ethics match? Do your morals match? That's a whole other thing. And
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And a lot of the time people don't know what their values are until they do the program and say, oh, actually my highest value is honesty, and you haven't been honest with me, and that's why there's conflict. But until you lay it out in that way, they can't communicate it in a way for the other spouse to comprehend. So again, it comes back to that method of delivery, right? So that's essentially one scenario. So they could come together and they could decide, you know what, we actually don't have the same values, and I love you enough to let you go, but I love you enough to be with you, and let's work on this. So that can go one of two ways. So at the moment they're going through a break and they're working through what they need to work through. Another scenario is with a client that was scared to communicate. So they were scared to communicate what they wanted from their spouse. So what ended up happening is they became submissive to everything their spouse wanted to do, because they were in fear if they communicated, they'd get let down, they'd get rejected. So then there was the element of fear of rejection there. So anything that comes through in a relationship that's essentially, a fear or an insecurity, again, it goes back to yourself. So what we did was we processed that for the individual, and then when the spouse actually communicated to her partner what she wanted, and he gave it, he said, well, I need to know what you want. I'm not a mind reader. And that's that famous thing. We women, a lot of women, I don't want to generalize there, but think that men are mind readers. They're absolutely not. They need to know exactly what it is you want. Yep. As soon as she communicated it in a very confident, clear, concise way, their relationship has hit another level of just connection. Awesome. So there's that kind of scenario as well, where he just had no idea and didn't know any better. And it's not that he was doing anything bad. He just thought, oh, she likes doing what I do. Yeah. So let's just go with it. And that's what it comes down to as well. So he also understands to be more receptive to asking her what it is she wants as well.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, couples especially, when they get comfortable with each other, they start to live a bit more on autopilot. And they get into routine, and then they just stop a lot of what made them fall in love to begin with. But I want to talk about the whole values thing. So last year, I put down, and I've done it like for the last few relationships, where I've almost written a letter to the universe about, this perfect partner. Only this time I had a friend guide me to do it like way more in depth. I think it was about 4 pages long. It was broken down in personality traits, values, moral, spirituality, all the rest of it. It was very, very detailed. I then turned that into a recording with some meditation music in the background, and I listened to that every night for, I think it was a month or two. And then I just kind of left it. And then that's when I met my now partner, Lana. And when I listened back on it recently, so this is July last year when I created it, I listened back on it recently and I played it to her, and I said, listen to this. And she's like, oh my God, that's me. And I said, sure is. I said, hang on. And there's a bit of that as well. So either, whether you identify those things while you're in a relationship to see if you can make or break your relationship, or whether you do that to manifest the next partner, either way, having the same values and making sure you can eliminate the red flags ASAP. Oh, like I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air it is to have someone that is so alike. It's like we've both said we've never met anyone like previously where we are like, we're like bees and honey. You know what I mean? We can't get enough of each other and we just work. So, so important. So important.
It is.
Now, if you had 3 bits of advice to offer couples to work on themselves, where would people need to start?
With me. Come see me, really. So just being honest with where you're at with yourself, and then essentially having a self-reflection moment to see where you're at within yourself and to see how your life looks. How does your life look to you right now? Are you happy? Are you happy in your relationship? Are you okay in your relationship and you just want to, make it better? Whatever the case may be, because a lot of the time there could be really nothing wrong with the relationship per se, but more something within that's going on, that's a void that needs to be sorted out. So once that gets cleared, then you're able to go to the next level in your relationship. So I would say the first point is being honest with where you're at, and then whatever answer comes out of that, the second point is go and seek the help relative to what it is you feel you need. So asking for help, asking for guidance, having that specific person in your life, whether it's a friend, a family member, your mother, your sister, your brother, best friend, to say, hey, I'm experiencing this right now, and seeing if there's anyone else that understands or has gone through that before. So it's almost like finding anyone that is able to relate to. And then
I was going to say, would it be wise for them to take relationship advice from people whose relationships don't emulate where they wish to be, though?
Oh, so in terms of when I say seeking, speaking to someone that they can relate to, someone that they know have possibly been through it and have come out of it.
Okay. Yep.
Or even just because some people can feel like they're the only ones going through what they're going through.
Yep.
Essentially. So even if they are talking to someone and someone's in the same position as them, and then having that mindset to go, okay, well, if we're in this position, how are we going to get help from this so we can come out of that? So having that open mind, mindset, that growth mindset, as opposed to fixed mindset to say, well, there's nothing we can do, so let's just stay stuck here. So it's ensuring that you're in the growth mindset space. And the third thing is really just being patient with yourself as you go through the journey and through life in general. I feel like a lot of the time people just rush through getting things done, being in a relationship. So many people can rush into getting into relationships before they actually do the work on themselves, because, of fear of being alone, of hating being alone, whatever the case may be. I just feel really be patient with yourself and don't rush into things. And if you're rushing into things because you've got that fear, then you've got some work to do. Definitely.
Yeah, great advice. Great advice. All right. Well, I wanted to keep today's podcast fairly short. So we're about half an hour.
Sure.
But it was good. I think we unpacked quite a few things there. So if people want to then reach out to you and get either couples counselling or even help with their own parenting, by all means, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, you can reach out either via my Instagram or website. So my Instagram is my name, so Elena, and then it's _Domazet, DOM for Mary, AZET. Or my website is www.levelup-lc.com.
Awesome. All right, guys, there you have it. I'm going to link all of that stuff below. So check out Elena, reach out to her so she can help take your love and life to the next level. Al, thank you very much for jumping on.
Thank you.
Any last parting words before we take off?
Not at this stage. I feel like I've said so much already. There was so much there. Look, at the end of the day, there's many things to unpack, and it's just there's no time, there's no right time. Just do it. Just do it now. Get on the phone and just do it.
If you want to be featured on my Instagram, please take a screenshot of this week's episode and tag @amanda.m.micallef on your Instagram stories. For all coaching, Kyani and public speaking inquiries, please see the description below. And if you want to learn more about today's guest, their details will be in the description below also. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment your feedback below. All feedback is welcome to help us improve this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.